Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back to KRS TV. This is your boy Kenny, and welcome to my new show Tea and Scandals, which is going to be my own docu-series that will premiere every Monday. And thank you for clicking on. And this first episode of Tea and Scandals is going to focus on the all-American girl group and probably one of the greatest girl groups of all time, the Supremes. The Supremes in their heyday had popularity that rivaled the Beatles, and they also are considered the pioneer girl group for many girl groups that follow, such as TLC and Destiny's Child. The original lineup of the Supremes, before they were called the Supremes, they were called the Primettes. And the original lineup was a quartet: Florence Ballard, Mary Wilson, Diane Ross, and Betty McGlone. Later on, Betty McGlone will leave the Primettes to be replaced by Barbara Martin, and Barbara Martin left in 1962 to pursue a family life. Well, as the Primettes, you know, they were all from, you know, the Brewster Projects in Detroit, and they first auditioned for Motown in 1960 when they were still in high school, and Berry Gordy, and pretty much how they got the audition, Diana Ross actually grew up down the street from Smokey Robinson, and she asked Smokey, who at the time was working with Berry Gordy, to get them an audition, which he did. When they auditioned, he pretty much told them to come back when they finished high school, and Flo Ballard is actually famous for saying that, well, he can't be that good if he didn't know how good we were. And they chuckle at it, but the thing is, it wasn't that they weren't good enough. It was that they were too young. And history has shown that Barry had, you know, issues with kid acts because, you know, at the time, Stevie Wonder, you know, was a child that was signed to the label, and you know, he had to deal with a lot, you know, dealing with kid acts. So he wanted them to be old. He wanted them to be older before he brought them on. But eventually, the Supremes were signed to Motown in 1961, and he definitely told them immediately, the name Primettes has got to go. And the Primettes, you know, they were a sister group to the group The Primes, which consisted of Paul Williams and Eddie Kendricks, who later became members of the Temptations. And the Primettes and the Primes was managed by a man named Milton Jenkins. So by the time they signed with Motown, you know, Barry said the name Primettes has got to go, and you know, they got all these different names, and Florence Ballard was the one who chose the name the Supremes. And at first Diana was against it because she said it sounds like a man's group, but according to Florence Ballard, they were called the Supremes because the Supremes are supreme, and I thought that was beautiful. Now I'm gonna actually tack into the actual tension as we know within the group, and that is the tension between Florence Ballard and Diana Ross. Well, according to history, there was tension between the two of them before they even got to Motown, and mainly it's because they both had different backgrounds. You had Diana Ross, who grew up in a very middle-class family. You know, her mother was a teacher, and her father, you know, was very strict about achievement in education. And even Diana Ross's older sister, Barbara, she was the first African American to actually hold the dean position at a medical school. So this is the upbringing that Diana came from, versus Florence Ballard, who was the 9th of 15 children, and it's her voice that gets her notice. And she pretty much came from what you would call a low-income family. And even though the family was poor, the family was rich and loved. And one of the people that that Florence looked to was her father, because her father also, you know, was a man who was into music as well. So he was one of the people that, along with her mother, that actually, you know, that actually encouraged her to follow her dream of becoming a singer. And how they were formed was that Mary Wilson and Florence Ballard were best friends, and pretty much I think Betty McClone was already a part of the group too, and Diana was actually the new kid that moved into the Brewster Projects, because Diana's family had expanded to 6 children, and she was the second out of 6 kids. And money got tight, so them moving to Brewster Projects was a way for them to, manage their finances in their home life. And she was a newcomer, and she knew Mary, and it was Mary that brought Diana to Florence. And that's where, Diana's road began. So there was already this different way of thinking between Mary and Florence and Diana, and it definitely just continued even when they became successful. But after they at first auditioned for Motown in 1960, Betty McClone left the group, and within that time frame, a tragedy had taken place. Florence went to a sock hop with her brother. They got lost in the party, and she gets a ride from a guy named Reggie Harding, who was pretty much a basketball star at their high school, and she thought he was a friend. She gets in the car with him, only to be raped by knife point. And this definitely shook Florence's world from that point on, because Mary Wilson described Florence as having this very big, bright personality, but after the sexual assault, she was never the same person. And the guy who raped her, Reggie Harding, he ended up playing for the Detroit Pistons, and ended up getting killed in Detroit in 1972 at the age of 30. Guess God really don't like ugly. But this situation really was one of the things that really destroyed Florence as an individual, because the situation was kind of swept under the rug, and Diane and Mary, because for weeks Florence had went into hiding. No one heard from her, no one seen her, and finally, once she finally decided to meet up with Mary and Diana, and she told them what happened, and they pretty much encouraged her to get back into singing and to let's continue to move forward. And yeah, that may have been a good thing, but the bad thing about it, there are things such as post-traumatic stress and trauma that Flo never dealt with. So here it was, Flo had this traumatic event that happened to her, and yet she got thrown back into the music business, and fame and fortune, in their mind thinking that fame and fortune was going to fix everything. But in actuality, it just magnifies the problems you already have. And that was definitely the case for Mary. That was definitely the case for Florence, after she was sexually assaulted. So by 1961, they were signed to Motown, and for 2 years, they pretty much lingered on the label because they had many releases and none of them were hits. And this was the same for the Temptations as well. They were known as the No-Hit Supremes, and the Temptations were known as the Hitless Temptations, and it wasn't a compliment. And they really were kind of like at wit's end because they needed a hit. They finally struck a hit in 1963 with the song "When the Love Light Starts Shining Through His Eyes," which reached number 23. But the game changer was in 1964 with the song "Where Did Our Love Go?" At the time that the song was released, they were on this tour, Dick Clark's Caravan of Stars, and they were listed as the "and others," which means they were, they were pretty much an opening act for some of the more established stars. And while they were on this tour, that's when the song went to number 1 on the pop charts, and it would become the first of 12 number 1 hits. And they had the actual, music styling and arranging from Holland Dozier Holland, which consisted of brothers Brian and Eddie Holland and Lamont Dozier. And this completely changed the Supremes' world. The success with the Supremes was pandemonium after Where Do Our Love Go, and it led to them appearing in the #1 places around the country, and it also led to more hits such as Baby Love, Come See About Me, Stop in the Name of Love, Back in My Arms Again. Baby Love was actually nominated for a Grammy for Best R&B Song. And also more hits, I Hear a Symphony, You Can't Hurry Love, You Keep Me Hanging On, Love Is Here Now You're Gone, and The Happening. So here it is, they are, rising to the top, and they're appearing in all the #1 places around the country and the world, because they became a global phenomenon. But the success of the Supremes became too much for Florence to handle, especially due to the fact that their boss, Berry Gordy, took more of a liking to Diana Ross, because after Where Did Our Love Go, that sealed Diana's place as the lead singer of the Supremes. And even though she was the lead singer, her and Mary and Florence got the same amount of payment. If Diana got a house, they got a house. If she got a car, they got a car. So what she got, they got as well. But this started to become a problem for Florence, because she began to see that, one, her life was no longer her life. She was a part of this big machine that Berry Gordy created. And then also the fact that they weren't a group anymore as far as her view of it, because they were no longer equal. They would, after a while, when they would go stay at hotels, they stayed on different floors, and they never hung out with each other like they used to as friends. So the only time they would see each other would be on stage, and that really started to upset Flo. Also adding to the fact that Flo had this phenomenal singing voice, but yet was forced to be a background singer. And I think one of the last things that did her in was that on their tours, Florence would lead the song "People" from the Broadway play Funny Girl, and she would get a standing ovation every time she did it. Well, after a while, I think by the time they performed at the Copacabana, which was groundbreaking, because the Copacabana was segregated, so for them to perform to this mainstream white audience was a game changer. And before that performance, she was told that Diana would be singing "People," and it was no longer her song. So that was like the last piece that Florence had, and now she doesn't have it. And this also led Florence to become an alcoholic, and it led to a lot of tension and fighting within the group, because it was as if that, her whole life, Florence had been working on developing this phenomenal singing voice, but then yet now come to Motown, and now that they have success, she's being told that she's not good enough, and that furthermore, at first they used to stand together side by side, but now Diana was being pushed more up front, and Mary and Florence were pushed more to the back. So that definitely started to have an effect on Florence and her relationship with Diana, and definitely it definitely was a big fight between her and Berry Gordy, but after they signed the contracts, the group was his, and he did what he wanted to. And there was even told that when they were on tour, during their heyday, Florence was stricken with pneumonia, and it lingered longer than it needed to, because she wasn't getting proper rest. But Berry's attitude was like, hell, there's money to be made. I don't give a damn if you're sick or not. Let's get it. And it started to, really become, too much for Florence to handle. So it's like the more the group became, the more withdrawn Florence became. And things really started to hit a head. Things really started to hit a head, towards 1967. They were performing at the Flamingo Hotel in Las Vegas. And then also, this was also after Flo had missed appearances and missed, flights, and was becoming, unresponsive, due to her drinking binges. So pretty much what happened is that there was a singer, Sydney Birdsong, who was a part of Patti LaBelle and the Bluebells while they were in London, regrouping, because due to the late 60s, the musical taste was changing. So they were in London regrouping. Sydney, pretty much, came to Detroit and began to become groomed to replace one of the Supremes. And Sydney Birdsong even admits that she didn't even know which Supreme was leaving. But, at their performances, Sydney was sitting in the audience watching everything. And, of course, this was to Florence's dismay, because Florence was constantly being reminded that you're replaceable. And then at this Flamingo Hotel performance, not only did she witness the marquee outside go from the Supremes to Diana Ross in the Supremes, but then she saw that as far as the wardrobe, there were dresses with Cindy's name on it. So, and then also she was constantly being taunted by Berry Gordy, who was constantly telling her that she was too fat and all of that. So all of these things just kind of balled up together, and she just exploded. She did the show at the Flamingo. She was drunk, and she ended up doing a dance move which exposed her stomach. So here it is, the cool, calm, sophisticated Supremes with one of their singers exposing her stomach on stage. That was the gauntlet. And from that point, Florence was fired, and Sydney Birdsong took her place, and then they became Diana Ross in the Supremes. But the thing about it is that the Diana Ross and the Supremes, as far as their performances and their television appearances, they became bigger than ever. There was more investment in the wigs, the gowns. They were still in pandemonium, but their hits dried up after Holland Dozier Holland left Motown in 1968. So they had a lot of releases, and they were no longer the mainstream. They didn't have any more the #1 hits that they had prior. And after Holland Dozier Holland left, Berry Gordy created another team of writers that he called the Clan. Two of the members that were a part of it were Valerie Simpson and Nick Ashford, famously known as Ashford and Simpson. And they came up with the album Love Child. Now, the irony of this whole situation is that even though it was a Diana Ross in the Supremes album, Diana was the only member that was actually singing on the track. Cindy and Mary didn't even record any vocals on the track. I think it was the Motown group, the Adantes, who sang backup on all of those songs. But it was Cindy and Mary who performed them on television. But it was becoming more and more apparent that things were being set up for Diana Ross to become a solo star. So her last performance with the Supremes, meaning Diana Ross, was on January 14th, 1970 at the Frontier Hotel. After that, Diana Ross left the group, and the new singer, and she was replaced by singer Jean Terrell. And people thought that Diana would become an instant success, and the Supremes would falter. But Diana actually struggled for 2 years to get her solo career off the ground, whereas the Supremes, after Diana left, still had hits. One was Up the Ladder to the Roof, Stone Love, Nathan Jones, Floor Joy. So they still had hits after Diana left. But Diana, after leaving, eventually, decided to go a different route into acting in movies. And she has premiered in, the first movie that she premiered in was Lady Sings the Blues, where she played Billie Holiday. It garnered her a lot of appeal, and she was also nominated for an Academy Award for Best Actress. The next film after that was Mahogany. Then it was The Wiz, which she starred with a 19-year-old Michael Jackson, along with Nipsey Russell and Ted Ross. And she also did the movie, a TV movie called Out of Darkness, which she played a woman who was suffering from schizophrenia. And I have to say, she was wonderful in this movie, and she was nominated for a Golden Globe. And then another movie that's just one of my faves is Double Platinum, which is a movie she did with Brandy. So you know, movie roles poured in for Diana, and the Supremes were still thriving. But sadly, that wasn't the case for Florence Ballard, because after leaving the Supremes, she married Tony Chapman, who was a chauffeur for Berry Gordy. They had 3 children. They had twin girls, Michelle and Nicole, and a daughter, Lisa. She tried to establish her solo career, but once she was let go of Motown, she signed a contract where she received about almost close to $140,000, but she could no longer use her lineage or her connection to the Supremes. And I felt if she was able to use, like, Florence Ballard, formerly of the Supremes, she could have created her own success and could have made her own money. Because regardless of the fact that Diana Ross was Berry Gordy's favorite, the fans loved the group, and Florence was loved and beloved by the fans. So she could have made her own money, but because of that contract and due to those legalities of it, she wasn't able to use her connection to the Supremes. So when her debut album didn't spawn her any hits, it was shelved and she was let go from the label. And her husband, Tony Chapman, was considered like a leech. He only was around when she had money, and when she was struggling, he wasn't there. And also, there were reports that he was also physically abusive towards her. And sadly, you know, she also went to court again with Motown, for back royalties. And that case, and actually she did win an injunction, but the lawyer, her attorney, pretty much ran off with the money. So I would depict Florence Ballard in this whole situation as like a lamb lost in the jungle. And sadly, she didn't have the right people around her to help protect her from the demonic forces that are prevalent in the music industry. And sadly, she got devoured. And what ended up happening is that she later on did win, and she did win a settlement, after she went to court, against the lawyer that robbed her. She did win a settlement where she was able to buy a new house, because Flo had lost everything. She had lost, not only, she pretty much, fell into a deep depression. Her alcoholism got worse, and she ended up losing her home. And Diana even wrote a check to help pay her mortgage to save her home, but Flo at this time was so disoriented and so out of it that she never cashed it. So she had lost her home, and she ended up, having to go on welfare. And that's when this author and writer named Peter Benjamin decided to interview her, because it just baffled him that she was a part of one of the biggest girl groups of all time, and yet she's penniless and she's on welfare. Something's not right here. So within this interview, she opened up about her feelings toward the Supremes. She opened up how much she disliked Berry Gordy, and how he literally divided and conquered, how he divided and conquered the group, and how at one point they were an equal group, and then after a while things changed, and Diana was gonna walk away with the star of the Supremes. And she was pretty much very vocal about what was going on with her at that time. And towards around this time, she started to make a comeback. She was, after she won the settlement, she was going to make her comeback, as far as her music career. But sadly, on February 22nd, 1976, Florence Ballard died from cardiac arrest at the age of 32. So I have to say, this is one of rock's greatest tragedies. And they've said that Florence Ballard was one of rock's greatest tragedies. Even Jennifer Hudson, when she won her Golden Globe for Dreamgirls, you know, and she played the role of Effie White, which was kind of loosely based on Florence Ballard. And we definitely wanted, you know, we wanted Flo to have that comeback that Effie had in the play. But she dedicated her award to the memory of Florence Ballard, that she would never be forgotten. And I thought that was very touching and very surreal. And, you know, it just goes to show that this was a woman who had immense talent, but was never really given a fair chance in the music industry. And it was just insane because at 21, she was a part of one of the biggest girl groups in the world. And then by the age 32, she was dead. And it's just a sad story that this young woman wasn't able to further her career and actually establish herself as the true talent that she was. And a lot of people, you know, attacked Diana for this because they felt that Diana, you know, pretty much caused Florence's downfall, when that really wasn't the case. I mean, she did benefit a lot from her alliance with Berry Gordy, but I would have to say it was the industry that caused her downfall. And I would have to attach Berry Gordy to that, because Berry Gordy was the one who was the mastermind, and he was the one that was running everything. I mean, even after the Supremes finally hit #1, he focused more attention on the Supremes more than anything. He was hands-on. And there were a lot of verbal battles between Florence and Berry Gordy. And, you know, much to the dismay, her, you know, it just got to the point because she realized that this situation was bigger than her. Like, it was like her against the machine. And Barry had the money, he had the connections, he had the machine, so she got devoured by it. And sadly, there weren't strong people around her to protect her or to guide her as far as her career. I mean, even as her solo career, her husband was a chauffeur to Berry Gordy, you know, before he married her. She wanted him to be her manager because she didn't trust many people. But I think if she had a more established manager who had experience in the music world, she probably would have been able to be successful. And because Tony Chapman had no knowledge whatsoever of being a manager. But, you know, unfortunately, you know, if certain things would have happened for Florence could have had a different outcome. But personally, I don't feel that Diana intentionally caused Florence's downfall, because even though there was tension between them, they did love each other. And even in the recording, you know, she talks about, you know, her issues with Diana, but she always shared that she loved her. You know, she was her sister along with Mary, and her and Mary were best friends. They grew up together. So definitely, that was something that was earth-shattering. You know, that we lost, you know, that we really lost a star that never really got a chance. So after, you know, Diana Ross left the Supremes, the lineup was Jean Terrell, Mary Wilson, and Sidney Birdsong. Eventually, Sidney Birdsong left and was replaced by Linda Lawrence. Linda left to pursue a family, and Sidney Birdsong came back. Then later on, Jean Terrell left and was replaced by Sherry Payne, who's the sister of singer Frida Payne. And then pretty much afterwards, Sidney Birdsong left again for the final time in 1976 to be replaced by Suzette Green, and the Supremes end up disbanding in 1977. The last time after the Supremes disbanded with Diana Ross in 1970, they never performed with each other again, you know, meaning Diana Ross, Mary Wilson, and Sidney Birdsong, until Motown 25, which was a very huge variety event that was celebrating the years of Motown. And you can definitely tell that the Supremes performed it, you know, as being a part of the lineup, because they brought back everybody from Motown's history, like Martha and the Vandellas, Mary Wells, the Jackson 5. But you can definitely tell the tension was still thick between the three girls. So when they was on stage, you could feel that there was tension, and you know, you can just see it, that there were still a lot of unsolved issues from the past that they never overcome. And this was even more so exposed when, after Diana was honored with her VH1 Divas concert, and she was on the bill with Donna Summer, Faith Hill, you know, were some of the acts that pretty much were the opening act for Diana Ross. And at this you know, concert, we were introduced to the Supremes' Return to Love tour, and I was excited because I thought that, wow, you know, Mary and Florence were going to be a part of it, and that wasn't the case. It was Diana was the only original member of the Supremes that was there, but she was performing with two Supremes that she never performed with, and that was Linda Lawrence and Sherry Payne. You know, and there was a lot of money that was going to be poured into this tour because everybody was expecting this reunion. I mean, this is the all-American girl group of all time, so everybody wanted to hear some of those old songs again. And there was a lot of money that was spent on elaborate sets and everything for this tour. But Mary Wilson, you know, went on a public campaign to talk about how she was not a part of the planning, and that she was only offered, you know, maybe $1 to $2 million, maybe $3 million, and she wasn't a part of any of the planning. It was like everything was done. All she had to do was show up. And Mary Wilson felt slighted, and she went on this main campaign and said that this is not a real reunion tour. You know, Diana's performing with two Supreme members that she never performed with in you know, when she was an active member of the group. So due to this, the tour eventually was canceled, and it got a lot of bad reviews, and this definitely, you know, put Diana in a very tough place. But since then, Diana has fully recovered, and I can honestly say that Diana is still one of the great divas of the music industry, and she's paved the way for a lot of artists to come her way. You know, for example, Whitney Houston, Mariah Carey, many others. And you know, she's left a great legacy, and we're even seeing her legacy being carried on with her children. Her oldest daughter, Rhonda Ross, who is her child with Berry Gordy, you know, #LoveChild. She's an actress. The most role I remember her in was in the movie The Temptations. She actually played the wife of Paul Williams. And her other daughter, two daughters that she had with her first husband, Bob Ellis. Her daughter, Tracy Ellis Ross, is a well-renowned actress herself. She was on the hit show Girlfriends, and now she's currently on the hit show Blackish, which she recently won a Golden Globe. And she also had a daughter. She also had another daughter with Bob Ellis, Chutney Lane. And then from her second husband with her second marriage with her husband, Artie Nayaz, she had two sons, Artie Nayaz Jr. and Evan Ross, who was also a singer and actor in his own right. One of his most notable roles was in the movie ATL, and currently he's playing the role of Angel Rivera on the Fox show Star, which is a show that's created by Lee Daniels, and it's also a show that I review on my channel, so definitely check that out. So I would say the real tea and scandal of this whole situation is the fact that, yeah, they achieved so much success, but there was a lot of drama, a lot of pain, and a lot of death within the process. And let's just say each of the girls, Mary, Florence, and Diana, paid a heavy price, you know, for their fame and fortune. So that's what I have. You know, feel free to get down in the comments. Let me know what you think of this. I would definitely love to hear from you guys. And also, you know, you know, follow my show Tea and Scandals, because I will premiere it every Monday. And this is, you know, my baby, and I definitely want to actually give you guys great content, and I definitely want to show great stories on this show. So definitely like this video, comment on this video, share this video, and I will be back with the next episode of Tea and Scandals. I thank you all for your love and support. So until next time, everybody, take care.